This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by the Virginia Education Association. An investment in teachers today will pay dividends tomorrow. Dignity Memorial. The Dignity Network provides professional and compassionate funeral, memorial, cremation, and cemetery services throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association for jobs, the economy, and public health, committed to advancing health and economic opportunity for all Virginians. Virginia Tourism Corporation, promoting why Virginia is for lovers, lovers of wine and craft beers, the outdoors, beaches, history, music, and more. Fall in love with Virginia at virginia.org. Additional support provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond. A very special welcome back to Senator Tim Kaine. I read that you're probably 1 out of 30 in American history who served as a mayor, a governor, and a U.S. senator. And I was wondering if anyone ever did the checking, if you added in city council member and lieutenant governor, you may be one of a kind for sure.
Well, it was funny when I was introduced once at an event as one of fewer than 30 people who has been a mayor, governor, senator, and I thought that can't be right. So many governors have been senators. But I took it back to the Senate historian and I said, I was introduced this way at an event, is that accurate? And the Senate historian did the checking and came back and said at that time, 29 people in the history of the United States have done it. And I thought, why would that be? And then I realized why. Being mayor will kill you. So governor to senator, there's hundreds, yes. But mayors, not so many.
Now, if you have the historian add to that city council member and lieutenant governor, yeah. I'm suspecting that number is going to shrink.
Well, I did ask, have anybody done those things and been a national party chair? Any of the 30, and the historian, she said no. So it turns out if I add that in, I know I'm unique. But everybody has their story. But anyway, mayor is the tough one. That's the tough job.
Well, before we jump into 2019, reflect, if you will, with us on some of 2018, maybe some of the accomplishments.
Yeah.
People tend to hear the bad news, but what were some of the accomplishments of the past year?
Yeah, so things that I'm proud of. I mean, I was spending a lot of time campaigning, but setting that aside, I got a lot of legislation done in 2018. I'm proud to say that President Trump has now signed about 20 bills of mine in 2 years, including some really strong bills at year end. Susan Collins and I worked on a bill that we were really excited about to build out a public health infrastructure to deal with Alzheimer's.
Excellent.
And that bill was just recently signed by the president. I did a number of bills related to career and technical education that got rolled into and incorporated within something called the Perkins Act reauthorization, felt very strongly about. Probably my biggest achievement in terms of just a new priority for me in 2018 was a series of bills to try to bring down the unemployment rate of military spouses. In my first 4 or 5 years in the Senate, I worked very hard on the veterans' unemployment rate. And one day, a military spouse at a roundtable meeting at Thomas Nelson Community College in Newport News said, "Do you know the military spouse unemployment rate is 3 to 5 times the national average?" And I said, "Well, I got a kid in the military, including a daughter-in-law who's a military spouse, and I didn't know that." But she explained why, it made sense, and together we worked on a set of bills that President Trump signed in August to try to bring down military spouse unemployment. So you're right, there's a lot of challenges. I'm talking to you in the middle of a shutdown of a portion of government, so there's a lot of challenges, but I pride myself on being able to find partners on both sides of the aisle, get legislation to the president's desk, and I'm happy that he's been able to sign a number of bills that I've worked on.
We'll tell our viewers that we're having a conversation on a Monday, January 7th.
Yeah.
They'll be seeing the show the following week, so maybe the shutdown, we'll see whether
so.
It's ended by that time.
I hope, David, that this will end the use of shutdown as a negotiating tool. Nobody should ever use a shutdown of the greatest government on earth as a negotiating tool. So as we talk today, President Trump and Congress have a disagreement on one issue, which is the right level of border security and immigration reform. But because of that disagreement, the president, and he has singularly done this, has shut down the government, a portion of the government, most of whom are completely unrelated to the dispute. So farmers can't get information from their extension agents right now. Small businesses that want SBA loans can't get them. So 800,000 federal employees are either furloughed or working without a guarantee of pay. And millions of American citizens are inconvenienced, everything from not being able to get tax forms to being turned away at national parks. And I just feel like it's unpatriotic to do this. If there's a dispute about an issue like border security, the president has a strong view and we do too. Well, let's have a debate, argument, robust dialogue about that. But why punish? Why needlessly punish these workers and contractors and citizens who work for agencies that have no relation to the dispute? So I'm going up to D.C. tomorrow, and I'm hoping by the time your folks see this show, the government will be reopened in the other areas, and then we can find an answer to that dispute.
What other challenges and goals do you have as you look on into 2019? International or national goals?
Yeah, so I will say that most of my work in the Senate, if you had Senator Warner here, he'd say the same thing, really focus on my committees, and I have great committees. So I'm on Armed Services and Foreign Relations. So that's,
Right.
keeping us safe. So in that space, it is basically strengthening alliances. I worry that sometimes the president undercuts allies. I want to make sure we have stronger and stronger alliances because that's the way for the U.S. to be safe in the world. Just in the last couple of days, an important priority of mine, which is making sure that we continue to grow to a 355-ship Navy. A lot of that work's done in Virginia. The Navy announced that they want to contract for 2 aircraft carriers, which would be enormously helpful in Hampton Roads and great for the nation's defense. I want to make sure we keep that on track. So strengthen alliances and make wise investments in national security. I'm on the Health, Education, and Labor Pension Committee. And in that committee, there's basically 3 things I'm working on. One is I have a bill called Medicare X, which is sort of the next step forward to make sure we can bring down health care costs and provide an easier way for more people to get coverage. And that would be to have a public option. The Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services would offer a nonprofit insurance product on the exchange that people could buy if they want to, wouldn't be required to, but it would give people more options. That's goal 1. Second goal, I have an ambitious idea that I call addiction-free by 2030. The head of the National Institutes of Health, Francis Collins, who's a Virginian, wonderful, wonderful public servant, says we know enough now about the science of addiction that we could make a pledge as a nation to be addiction-free by 2030, and we could actually do it. It's not an absence of knowledge. The question is, do we have the will? And I have a whole series of strategies from prevention and treatment and research and interdiction of fentanyl coming in, from over the border. That's one of the reasons I want to work with the president on border security, to stop fentanyl from coming in through ports of entry in the mail. We can be addiction-free by 2030. I want to work on that. And then the last issue on the HELP committee that's important is we are going to rewrite the Higher Education Act this year. So every 10 years or so, we'll reauthorize the Higher Ed Act. And that's everything from student financial aid to stopping sexual assault on campus to accreditation to public service loan forgiveness. My ideas on higher ed is to make sure we appropriately focus on the roles of community colleges and career and technical education, because higher ed's important for everybody, but not everybody needs the same kind of educational experience right after high school.
I know you've had experience in working and had concern about the so-called DACA kids.
Yes.
What do you see any potential breakthrough in 19 on that?
I think a deal is on the table. So in the midst of this shutdown, the first thing we have to do is reopen government. Once we've reopened government, we then do need, because what we would do is we would vote for a bill that Republicans agreed to just 2 weeks ago to fully fund every government agency for the rest of the year, except in the space that deals with the border security immigration issues. On those, we would pass a short-term bill to fund them for a month and then knock our heads together to find a deal. And I basically think that there's a deal there. And the deal would be border security money. And I've voted for significant border security investments, and I'm willing to do again if we spend it the right way. So even the president's own team is saying that the wall is not that good an idea. We need more border security agents. We need drones. How do you stop fentanyl from coming in that ravages communities? It's not coming in because people are carrying it across the border illegally. It's coming in packages in the mail or through legal ports of entry. So let's beef up security there. More people are in the country illegally because they come in on a visa and then overstay the visa than those who cross the border. So if you just build a wall, you're not really dealing with the main source of people who are undocumented. But I do believe the deal begins, let's do border security, but then I think we should permanently protect dreamers who came here as kids through no fault of their own. And David, I also think we should protect another class of citizens. President Trump wants to terminate the legal protection for a group of legal immigrants who have what's called TPS status, temporary protected status. They came here after the earthquake in Haiti, after hurricane in Honduras, after famine in other countries. There's about 400,000 of them from 10 countries. The president wants to terminate their protection, but they've been here legally, working and paying taxes. And so I think border security in exchange for protecting dreamers and those with TPS, to me, that would be a deal I'd be happy to vote for. But first we have to reopen government.
You know, ever so often I hear comments that there are issues with our friends to the north, the Canadian borders, perhaps somewhat significant that aren't being addressed. That everyone, the president and everyone talks about the border to the south.
Well, that's a really good point. And I would sort of say the same thing about this. The biggest group of people who are here without documents are people who come in on visas and overstay. Mm-hmm. So if you say, I'm against illegal immigration, so let's build a wall on the southern border, well, wait a minute. Are you against illegal immigration, or you're against just certain kinds of people from certain countries who speak a certain language and have a certain skin color? If we're going to be serious about illegal immigration and protecting border security, then let's really address the problem. So fentanyl that comes in through the mail, you could build a 1,000,000-foot wall, you're not going to stop it. You have to beef up the legal ports of entry to better inspect trucks that are coming in and give the mail and UPS and other entities that handle mail more ability to stop fentanyl coming in. So should we make investments in security? Absolutely. I've voted for them in the past. I'll vote for them again, but I don't want it to be a vanity project. I want it to really work. And then pair that with protecting hardworking people who are here, who pay taxes, and who are a credit to our Commonwealth and to our country.
What about the so-called trade war that's going on? How do you see that being changed in some ways, hopefully for the better, not for the worse, in 2019?
Well, this affects Virginia significantly. If I talk to the Volvo plant in Dublin, makes Volvo trucks using imported aluminum and steel. It hurts them, the tariff regime. And if I talk to soybean farmers, it's hurting them in Virginia. Right. So let me say where the president's right, and let me say where the president needs to adjust. So the president's right to focus on China as a major problem. They support their own industries to undercut ours. They steal our intellectual property. So he's right. China's a problem. We have to take action against them. Now, here's where he's wrong. The right way to put pressure on China is to link arms with every other country who is facing the same problems. Europe's facing the same problems. Right. Canada is. Instead, what the president did is right out of the gate, when he put the aluminum and steel tariffs on, he used what's called the national security waiver to punish Europe and Canada. Now, the national security waiver was designed for us to go after adversaries, not allies. Canada, we have the longest undefended border in the world, and they've been with us in every war since the War of 1812. And I've seen European troops fighting side by side with our troops in northern Iraq and Afghanistan. My son was deployed with European NATO troops on the border of Russia. And so when you use a national security waiver to punish allies, and then you say, oh, hey, join with us because we'd like to pressure China, they're not going to join with you. So we need to reassemble our alliances and quit punishing allies like Canada and Europe, and then try to take coordinated action against China, we're much more likely to get a result if we do that.
Senator Kaine, I think maybe in one of your first years, on your first term, with the president of your own party, you were concerned about the War Powers
Yes.
Act and,
Yep.
and the lack of Congress really acting. You're now into your 7th year.
Yeah.
You have some colleagues on that. You maybe lost some.
I did. Both Senators Flake and McCain and Corker,
Yeah.
who are no longer in the Senate. Senator McCain sadly passed, and Senators Flake and Corker gone, had been good allies. But I will say this, David, I have a real simple belief. We should not be at war if Congress doesn't have the guts to vote on it.
Right.
President should always be able to defend the country even without asking permission or getting a vote in Congress. That's what a commander-in-chief does. But to take offensive action against ISIS or offensive action against the government of Syria, missile strikes against Syria, you ought to have a vote of Congress. We recently did something really powerful in the Senate that suggests to me we're starting to realize that we have to take that power back. The administration was essentially putting us in the middle of a civil war in Yemen that Congress had never voted on. And the administration even acknowledged it wasn't something that Congress had voted on. So we had essentially a resolution of disapproval that we voted on in mid-December, where we said, look, the U.S. should not be involved, taken aside, in the civil war in Yemen. Some of that was driven by dissatisfaction with the Saudis, who were the main kind of prosecutors of that war in the aftermath of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Virginia journalist who was murdered in Turkey by the Saudi government. But also it was a realization that this war was being poorly handled and the U.S. didn't have any business being in the middle of it. Now, we passed the Senate resolution and the Republican House wouldn't. But this was the first real step, David, of Congress under the War Powers Resolution in 1973 saying to a president, you're getting us into a war that we don't want to be on, and we're voting to stop it. And I think that's going to continue.
You know, one of the big issues, and again, another one of your concerns and the concerns of, I think, the vast majority of people is climate change. And when you come back to the Commonwealth and look at our bases, our military bases, look at Norfolk, there's significant issues that would be facing, if not your generation, certainly the next one coming along, unless something is done.
It's, and I would say in Virginia, one of it's a virtue in a way. For us, it's not a tomorrow issue, it's a today issue. So there are people in Hampton Roads who cannot sell their house because now normal title action floods their home so often every year that 10 years ago they could sell it, today that they can't. Businesses that are affected. Flooding on the main road in and out of the gate at the center of naval power in the world. And so in Virginia, we're seeing it daily. I was up in the Shenandoah National Park within the last year, and they were telling me about species that are basically being chased out of the park by warming temperatures that will no longer be there. So we see this every day, and we have to take steps to deal with it. What are opportunities? I hope this president, now here's an opportunity for the president. He's a guy who's a builder. Democrats like infrastructure. So why don't we do an infrastructure bill? And if we do an infrastructure bill to include resiliency investments, flood walls, pumping systems, shoring up military bases so that they can deal with climate issues. And it's not just sea level rise in Hampton Roads. Try running a military base in a place where drought is persistent. Very difficult to do. So extreme weather events cause these challenges everywhere. And I think as part of an infrastructure bill, there would be a chance for us to start to address it.
You've always, from my perspective, been someone who looks for the long picture.
Yes, I try to. It gets too frustrating if it's just about today.
Beyond the climate issue, which is clearly one, are there other issues that you think that Congress acting in the 116th could do something that would help the next generation coming along? Some major significant things that hopefully you all will address, because it seems so often it's putting out the fire. It's dealing with the crisis at the moment. You put your finger on a challenge. Those of us in elected office often think of time based on our election cycle. So 2 years in the House, 6 years in the Senate, 4 years as a governor. We need to be thinking longer than that. So what are some long-term things we could do? I mentioned this addiction-free by 2030 idea. I mean, the cost of addiction in this country, the human cost, is so significant. Even an issue like
unaccompanied minors fleeing Central America and coming to our border, it's because of the U.S. demand for drugs significantly. If we're willing to consume so many illegal drugs and we send dollars south to get drugs to come north, it tends to pervert and undermine all these legal institutions in the countries to our south, and that creates violence, and it creates drug gangs fighting for turf, and then it means kids have to leave their country. So our demand for illegal drugs fuels an awful lot of other challenges. So that's a big picture issue, not Democrat, not Republican. Addiction issue faces every community from the wealthiest to the poorest, every region of the country. So that would be a big picture issue. I think education issues. Virginia just won one of the 2 Amazon sites. Why did we win it? We won it because we got a great workforce. And today in this world, talent is the most precious resource. So an education system that equips people with skills, higher ed, but also apprenticeships and career and technical training and early childhood education to get people prepared. I think that's a long-term issue. And at least on the career and technical education and apprenticeships issues, I found they're not partisan at all. There's a lot of good work that can be done across the aisle. And then finally, the big picture, healthcare. We brought down the percentage of people who are uninsured. That's great. But costs are still too high and people still don't have enough choices. So I do think the next step forward, let's preserve what we have, not blow it up, but let's take the next step forward to have a healthcare system that really works. And before you get to healthcare, it begins with health. So how do we promote health and then have the healthcare system that can protect people, who are injured, who are ill, who have genetic predisposition to diseases. Promote health and then, help people when they're not well, and all of us are not well at some point in our life. Those are some of the big picture things that excite me.
No, the Virginia delegation is known to be one that in Washington it works together across regional lines, across party lines. You've got, 5 newcomers?
3 new Democrats and 2 new Republicans. So we, as you point out, David, we have a lunch every month, the 11 House members and the 2 senators. That seems like kind of an easy one. Like, why wouldn't most states do that? Well, it turns out very few states do that.
That's what I understand.
John Warner gets the credit for this. He started it, and we've maintained it. Bobby Scott, congressman from the 3rd, is now the dean of the delegation. We trade every month who hosts, and we sit down and talk about if we have different points of view on immigration reform. We all want the State Department to open up an embassy training facility at Fort Pickett and Dinwiddie. And so we may set aside the areas of difference, but we're all, okay, what are the things we have in common? Can we get the FBI headquarters to move to Virginia? Can we protect, a 355-ship Navy? So there's a lot of things we work on together. And you're right, it'll be a new delegation. When you think of 13 and 5 of the 13 are newcomers, okay, we'll have to get our sea legs under us, but new energy is helpful too. It's exciting and it's fun. And Congressman Scott, look, he's the dean of the delegation now and has been in since 1993. So he is going to do a good job, and we're going to continue to really work very, very closely together for Virginians.
We were talking just before we started the show about there's always an election, particularly in Virginia, but there's also national elections, and it's a long way to the next presidential election. And Democrats seem to have more than 24 people that are mentioned, including you and 2 other governors from former governors of Virginia.
Well, even a traffic jam in Virginia.
Yes. So beyond people taking notice of our 3 Virginia former governors, are there others that you think that is this far out that you think?
And look, I have said to everybody, people have asked him, I'm running, and I'm saying, look, you only run if you have an epiphany that tells you there is something that I can uniquely do, and I've never had such an epiphany. I'm focusing on doing my job in the Senate. There will be a lot of Democrats who will be mentioned. There will probably be a lot of Democrats who will go out and start traveling around the country and maybe even participating in debates on the Democratic side, which start in May or June, I think. But by the time you really get to it, which is the first nominating contest is in February of 2020, you're not going to have 24. I mean, it'll be down to a reasonable number. And bluntly, I think it's a little bit early. I think I don't mind primaries. I don't mind contests. I think it's good. I think people need to get out there and make their case, and folks have to see, what they think. And the key will be for everybody to put their best set of ideas forward. Can you criticize the other side? Sure. Can you criticize another Democrat's idea? Yeah, you can. But I'm more interested in what your idea is, and I think that's going to be the key to it. Everybody put up their best set of ideas.
I'm getting the signal that our time's up for today. We'll have you back on another time.
I like that.
And by then you'll tell us.
Yeah, I'll like that. Thanks,
thank
David.
you. Thank you very
Always
much.
good.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by the Virginia Education Association. An investment in teachers today will pay dividends tomorrow. Dignity Memorial. The Dignity Network provides professional and compassionate funeral, memorial, cremation, and cemetery services throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association for jobs, the economy, and public health. Virginia Tourism Corporation, promoting why Virginia is for lovers, lovers of wine and craft beers, the outdoors, beaches, history, music, and more. Fall in love with Virginia at virginia.org. Additional support provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.